This is a story about a game, but it's also about family and where a line has to be drawn. It comes from a dad who had to make a choice that no parent ever wants to make. The tournament judge looked at him, waiting for an answer, and he looked over at his son, who was pleading with his eyes. And in that moment, the father had to choose between his blood and the game they both loved. Because his son had broken the code, and he was about to break his son's heart. The father laid it all out. He and his son Leo were a team. For 6 years, Warhammer 40k had been their thing. They spent hundreds of hours building, painting, and playing. At 15 years old, Leo was good, like really good. And when they signed up for the regional grand tournament, it felt like the culmination of everything. They practiced for months. For them, this wasn't just a competition. This was a pilgrimage. For anyone unfamiliar, a Warhammer 40k tournament isn't just a couple of friends rolling dice in a basement. These are huge, structured events with time limits, official judges, and sometimes hundreds of players. There's a real etiquette to it. You play fair, you communicate with your opponent, and you respect the game. It's a social contract. And this father and son weren't just going to play a game, they were stepping into a serious community event. So the father explains that the first 2 rounds were a blur of excitement. Leo was on fire, winning both his matches decisively. The father was incredibly proud, as any dad would be. But in the 3rd match, he noticed something was off. A dice roll was quickly scooped up. His son declared a 6 for a crucial armor save. His opponent, a younger kid, just nodded, and a knot formed in the father's stomach. But he dismissed it as nerves or just the pressure of the tournament. Then, in the 4th match, the one that would put Leo in contention for the top tables, it happened again. He needed to make an 8-inch charge. The father saw the dice land, a 4 and a 3. Not quite enough. But he saw his son's move, nudging that tape measure an extra inch when his opponent had looked away. The charge was made. The game was won. This is where the alarm bells started to ring. What the father describes are classic subtle ways to cheat in wargaming. This isn't as obvious as bringing loaded dice. It's about fudging measurements and misreporting rolls. And in competitive 40k, this stuff is poison. A single inch can be the difference between winning and losing an entire game. It's a massive breach of trust that robs the opponent of a fair match and cheapens the effort that everyone else has been putting in. And it all came to a head in the final match against a veteran player. It was tense, and it was a very close game. On the final turn, Leo needed to hold an objective to win. His last model was just barely outside the 3-inch scoring range. And then the father saw it. The opponent saw it. But when the opponent was distracted by a question from the next table, his father watched his son slide his model just enough to get into range. And his heart sank, because this wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. And before the opponent even turned back, his father walked over and just said, "Leo, no." His son's face went pale and he started to deny it, his voice trembling as he asked what his dad was talking about. And the father looked at him, then at the veteran player, and just said, "Excuse me, can we get a judge?" And this is the point of no return. In any tournament, when there's a dispute or an accusation of cheating, calling a judge is exactly what you're supposed to do. You don't argue at the table. So the father followed the rules perfectly. But to do it against your own son, that's a heavy choice. So, as the story wraps up, the father explained that the judge came over and he recounted what he saw. Leo broke down and admitted to everything: the dice, the measurements, moving the model, and of course he was disqualified immediately. He was crying, humiliated, and refused to look at his father. The car ride home was the longest hour of that father's life, and his son hasn't spoken to him in 2 days. His wife thought he was too harsh, that he should have protected his son. But for the father, the code of the game, the sportsmanship, it's the foundation of everything, and he felt like he had nothing else that he could do. So the big question is, was the dad wrong for what he did? From one perspective, the answer is a clear no. It's an incredibly painful situation, but he taught his son a lesson about integrity that is so much bigger than the game of plastic soldiers. The entire culture of this hobby depends on players holding themselves and each other to a standard of fair play. If he had let his son get away with it, all he would be doing is teaching him that cheating is fine as long as you don't get caught. And that's a much more dangerous lesson in the long run. So he chose integrity of the game and his son's character over a single win. Yes, it was a brutal choice, but in the grim darkness of the far future, some lines just have to be held. But what do you think? Was this tough love, or did he go a step too far? Let me know your verdict in the comments. Thanks for judging that one with me on Am I the Arsehole But Zen? Let's see if your verdict changes next time.